Hello and welcome everyone to a very special episode of Podcasting Them Softly. This is Nick. I'm joined, of course, with Frank. Hey, Frank.
Hello. Hi, Nick.
How you doing? Frank and I are extremely lucky to have maverick indie filmmaker Wayne Kramer here on the show today. And if you guys don't know who Wayne is, well, honestly, shame on you, because for the last 12 years, he's been making some of the coolest, most diverse, exciting, under-the-radar gems like 2003's The Cooler, Running Scared in 2006, which is basically one of the craziest adult-oriented Grimm's fairy tales ever concocted, but not made by Grimm. The 2009 immigration drama Crossing Over, and most recently, the extremely entertaining Pawn Shop Chronicles, which came out limited release in 2013 and is now on Blu-ray. He's an extremely adventurous filmmaker. We're extremely lucky to have him on the show. And Wayne, very happy to have you here. Thanks for coming on.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, man. I just want to say real quick, I'm a huge fan of your work, as is Nick, and it's a complete honor to have you on here. And you're one of the first filmmakers that I actually had discussions with on Facebook, which was way cool. And I have told you this before, but I think you're one of the most gracious guys I've met when it comes to people in the film industry who I've spoken with. It's a riot to talk to you about James Bond or John Barry or whoever. So
yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I wish when I was a younger guy, and I mean, you're not as young as when I was like 16, 18, 19. It wasn't even, I was growing up in South Africa. The idea of being able to have any kind of ongoing dialogue with somebody like Brian De Palma or Walter Hill, Ridley Scott, any of these kind of guys that I never dreamed of having a forum or medium to contact them with other than writing letters, which went nowhere. I think it's pretty cool for people with an interest in film and young filmmakers today, along with DVD commentaries. There's so much more access. Sometimes that's a good thing, sometimes it's a bad thing, but it does. I mean, like you mentioned, John Barry. It was a huge thrill for me when I met him, because for my own personal reasons, I just wanted to communicate to him how much his music has meant in my life. And I'm sure 5 minutes later, John Barry didn't know who I was. But you feel like when some art form has become so important to you and so meaningful in your life, you do feel like you want to reach out to the creator of that and just say, hey, thank you. And so I get that part of it,
Yeah, it's wonderful. I remember one of the first times I spoke with you, we talked about Body Heat, and you linked the Screen Archives 2-disc, I believe it was the score that the Screen Archives put out, and I ordered it right away, and I thought that was one of the coolest things ever.
It's John Barry score to Body Heat plays in my house maybe at least once a month. It's I can't even tell you how many times I've seen the movie.
Right.
I snuck out. I remember being in high school in South Africa, and I was about 16, and the movie, it was one of the first movies to show there that was not that heavily censored as most films were. And I was going to like an art school, and I snuck out of school, and there was this one theater in Johannesburg in this area called Hillbrow, where you could go to movies that were rated, and Body Heat was rated nobody under 21, but they just didn't give a shit at that theater. You could be like in grade school and turn up and say, give me a ticket for Body Heat, and they'd be like, yeah, whatever, some old timer at the door, just smoking, didn't care. So, I mean, I remember having that Body Heat experience in the theater so clearly, and just be knocked, backwards by the music, by the acting, by how hot it was. It's my favorite Lawrence Kasdan movie by far, and probably my very, I'm talking about modern noirs, but that probably I would say that's my favorite one. I'm sure I'll think of some other things that I care about a lot, but and anytime, the funny thing about John Barry, because I don't want to turn this whole conversation into a John Barry thing, but I used to go to film, and I was very much aware of him from the James Bond scores. But I used to go to a film, and I would start watching it, and the score would hit me immediately. I go, oh my God, that. When the credit comes up, I'd go, I guarantee that's John Barry. He had such a distinctive style for me, and I didn't always used to check the credit blocks when I was a teenager, but for some reason, when I started to love the music in the film, and the John Barry credit came on, I was like, I knew it, And
one of the things I was going to say, one of the things about your movies that you've made, 4 wide release films, and they've all been very different from each other, but they've all been extremely well scored. So it sort of brings me to especially with the Cooler, the music in the Cooler is just like that perfect blend of Vegas, sleazy saxophone and sort of that really just that it just fits the milieu so much. When you were looking to do the score on the Cooler and you hooked up with Mark Isham, what were some of maybe your influences, or how did you go about devising that score? Because one of the most memorable things from the Cooler, amongst many things, is the music. I mean, it's a great score.
Yeah, it's actually a great story about the Cooler and the score. Being a huge John Barry fan, I always envisioned that I would try and get John Barry to score the film. And this was in took place in the last 10 years of Barry's career, where he basically never scored a movie. And I don't know sort of what was going on with him. He was so burnt out by the industry, and he got replaced on a couple of movies, or he just didn't have the will to do it anymore. But when I had a first cut of the Cooler, and I discussed with him, and I said, yeah, let's try get John Barry, because and then the funny thing is I'd only temped the opening sequence, the flyover Vegas and the intro, with a John Barry piece from an album he did called Eternal Echoes. I think it's called Fred and Ginger, or Fred and something. I forget the exact name of the cue, but it was a really great big band, Vegas-y sounding piece. And the rest of it, while I was looking for material, because John Barry's music is so particular, it's impossible to temp with it, because it evokes a completely different movie each time in a way. It just doesn't lay into anybody else's film. And Sidney Pollack has also talked about this too. So I realized I had temped everything else with pretty much Mark Isham. And I was a big Mark Isham fan. I loved his score to Point Break. I had every Isham score you could get as well. And so we took a shot at John Barry, and I knew Barry's agent, Richard Kraft. I'd worked for him briefly around 96, 97, putting together music submissions for composer clients. And Richard was like, yeah, let's it wasn't Richard. I think it was Richard. I'm trying to think if I dealt with Richard or another guy at the agency where Richard was. But anyway, they sent the movie to Barry, as far as I know, and Barry was like busy on The Incredibles. I don't know if you guys realize that he was the composer hired to score The Incredibles before Michael Giacchino. And they wanted Barry to do he's very Bondian 60s sound, like On Her Majesty's Secret Service. And Barry couldn't really go back to that sound. He didn't have it in him, or didn't want to. And so he did demos for them, and they basically replaced him after the demos with Michael Giacchino. And that's why that score sounds so much like On Her Majesty's Secret Service to me, or at least to my son as well when he hears it. So anyway, Barry apparently saw the movie and was like, I'm busy with Incredibles, or I don't have time to do this. So as heartbroken as I was like, what's the next move now? Because I can't screw the music up on my first real film. And I said I was sitting with my editor, Arthur Coburn, and we were like, you know what? I love Mark Isham. I've temped almost every piece in this film with I was using tracks from Little Man Tate and tracks from Gotti and Afterglow and a bunch of great, great jazz-flavored, emotional Isham scores. And I said, you know what? I don't know anyone who knows Mark Isham. I'm just going to cold call his agency, and I'm going to say, would Mark like to come see the movie? Was Mark available? And I thought I was just going to get blown off like right away. I thought they would be like, yeah, Mark's working on 6 movies. He doesn't, we didn't have a big musical budget. Yeah, and so I picked up the phone. I got someone on the line, and I said, "Look, I've just directed this movie. It's with Alec Baldwin, William H. Macy, and I'd love Mark to take a look at it and see if he wants to do the score." And one thing I did know is that Mark did a lot of indie films, so I felt I had at least had that in my favor. And at first, the agent tried to talk me into some of their newer clients, and I said, "No, I'm only making this call about Mark Isham." So she said, "Okay, let me call Mark. This may be a good timing because I know he's been looking for stuff and he's got a window possibly." And I think before the end of the day, she called me back and said, "Mark will come see the movie. So when do you want to show it to him?" And I happened to be having like a friends and family kind of test screening. Like it was literally the next day. And I was doing a test run for it, and I said, why doesn't Mark come to the test run and I'll show it to him? And that way there was no one else. It was just me and him. And so Mark came, and it's the first time I really met him. And after the movie, he was excited about it. And he said, "I would love to do this. I'd love to work it out." And that was basically the start of that relationship. And I was over the moon, man.
Yeah, he's a terrific talent. I mean, off the top of my head, his score for like The Bad Lieutenant, Port of Call, New Orleans, absolutely love the music in that film. And you're so right. Like he's, even when you look at his credits, just an unbelievable. I mean, Spartan, the music in Spartan is fantastic. But yeah, he really hit that perfect note, I would say, for everything.
No, I was just going to say, with Mark had walked into the theater to sit down for the screening, and I think the first thing I said to him was, "You've got to give me your score to Point Break," because it was unreleased at the time. And, so I think he knew who he was dealing with. And then it must have been pretty trippy for him to watch it because his music was all over the movie, even scores that had never been released that I'd gotten my hands on, And it was great to work with, and I think every filmmaker should have that experience where they come to the composer's studio where he works, and he sits you down for the first time, and you get to hear the first sort of architecture of what is going to be the score for your movie, assuming you like it. And I have to say, from the time Mark played the first cues for The Cooler to me, I was just grinning from ear to ear, And he was very much aware of my love for Barry and the temp scores. And I think I've done 3 movies with Mark. The last one, Crossing Over, was a complicated experience that had nothing to do with Mark, so I don't look on that as favorably an experience. But with the first 2, Mark knows I bring him a full built-up temp track that I do myself. I have like over 11,000 film scores personally, and I build the track myself. I don't use a temp editor for it. And then, Mark then has to kind of decipher why, like on Running Scared, Wayne Kramer's temped this with Bill Conti's Gloria, and and all kinds of obscure choices, But that is one of the most fun parts of the experience, when the movie's going well for you and you've got it, and now it's just up to the composer to bring it home, and to just and it's never just like on Running Scared, the first time Mark played me some cues that he was working on, I was like, "Mark, this stuff is good, but it's not what I want. It's not thematic at all." And I think he had just worked on a movie where the director beat him up to take all theme out of the movie, so I think he was feeling a bit like sort of thinking that, the trend was not to go thematic on this film. And I said, "No, I want it to be intense. I want it to be visceral, but you've got to give me, a beautiful theme, or, to contrast against the ugliness of the violence." And so I think he was kind of relieved. Composers get relieved when you sort of challenge them to bring interesting or traditional film music. Because a lot of what I'm hearing today is just kind of droning, ambient kind of stuff. And every now and then when somebody like nails an amazing film score, like Atticus Ross did an awesome job on Love and Mercy. And he was interpolating some of the Beach Boys songs into the score, but the score is just fantastic apart from all the songs. It's like one of the best scores I've heard in a long time.
Didn't realize that Atticus Ross had done that after doing all the David Fincher stuff, so that suggests some range.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it either.
I haven't seen that. I'm waiting for that to come out. I saw you post about it and your comments about Love and Mercy, and I'm really looking forward to seeing that film. I know Nick is as well. One thing I wanted to ask you, and this is, you know, for the Cooler specifically, but for all of your films, what I'm drawn to, one of the things that I'm drawn to immediately is the cast that you pull together for each one of your films is fantastic. And I remember the first time I saw The Cooler, I didn't see it in theaters, but I bought the DVD the day it came out because it had William H. Macy and Alec Baldwin and Paul Sorvino and actors that I really, really admire and like. But particularly for The Cooler, I mean, it goes without saying that William H. Macy is just incredible in that film. And I believe that was the first time I saw Maria Bello, memorably saw Maria Bello in a film. But I know Alec Baldwin, well, obviously Alec Baldwin was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for the Oscars. It was his first Oscar nomination. At the time of making that, did you know that this was going to be like Alec Baldwin's somewhat of a signature performance, or the performance that was going to get him notoriety with the awards circuit?
You know, it's funny with The Cooler because I originally, when I was writing the script with my co-writer on that, Frank Hanna, and right early on when I had a first draft, and I knew Chaz Palminteri a bit because we had tried to do, you know, he was interested in one of my scripts that I wanted to direct. It was an early script, and we just kept the relationship going over the years. We still haven't gotten that movie made. And I kind of wrote the role of Shelley in mind for Chaz, knowing that, okay, here's someone I would go to, and I thought he could do it. And every time I sent the script to Chaz was always doing something. He wasn't focused on it. It didn't feel like he was super, you know, intrigued or excited about it. So when the financing finally came together, and this was probably like 4 years later, and Ed Pressman, who's one of the best producers in the business, one of the most supportive guys, I love Ed, and we were talking about the casting, and Ed had a relationship with Alec Baldwin, had done a couple of movies with him, and he said, what about Alec for this? And Alec was so far, you know, in the dreamscape of that kind of actor for the role, I couldn't even allow myself to consider that. And then I'm starting to think Alec Baldwin playing Shelley, bringing, you know, that edginess from Glengarry Glen Ross and Malice and all that. I thought this couldn't even possibly be, you know. And Ed said, "Oh, I'm gonna send it to him." Luckily, at that time, Bill Macy was now officially attached, which was a really tough thing to do, far tougher than getting Alec on the movie, because Bill was at a point where he was feeling like he had played this kind of character so many times. And he was also just coming off Jurassic Park 3 and was seeing a bigger movie career in the future for himself, and didn't know me, and, you know, but he had read the script. He had gotten the script fairly early and liked it. And then by the time we came back to him, when Ed was behind it, I think he had changed sort of where he saw the direction for his career. So I used to call Bill's agent like once a week saying, Bill's got to do this movie, or I'm not even doing it. That's going to be the reason this movie never happens, because Bill doesn't do it. I was like psycho, you know. And at the same time, Ed was working it and calling her and trying to get hold of Bill and all that. And eventually, I mean, I literally had resigned myself to the fact that Bill was not going to do this movie, and we were moving on to other actors. And all of a sudden, I got a cold call from one of the producers saying, "You're still interested in Bill for this, right? Because I think he's willing to meet with you." And I was like, "How did this happen?" But I was like, "Shit, yeah, bring it on." Which I have to say, out of every encounter with an actor, every meeting, out of every step in my life, who knows where my career goes tomorrow, because I don't even know, but that was the most pivotal meeting, me meeting Bill Macy and having him leave that meeting saying, "I'm going to do this movie, or I'll really consider doing this movie." That was the moment in my life that if I had screwed that up, I would look back at that moment how I destroyed my life completely. So you can't even imagine how prepared I was trying to be for that meeting, you know. And in fact, I'll never forget this moment. I walked into this restaurant where I was meeting Bill in like Hollywood, you know, off Beverly Boulevard. And I was there a little early, and then I see him coming through the door, and I get up, and he walks towards me, and he goes, He goes, "Hi, I'm Bill Macy, and I just want to let you know I haven't committed to doing this movie yet." That was and I was like, "All right," but it went well. I think we developed a rapport in that conversation, and he grilled me, man, like nobody on this planet before. And I think after that, I wasn't sure how he felt about me, but then I heard like he was now willing to talk seriously about making the movie. But once he was in, he was like so fucking in. I mean, the guy was just like my absolute supporter on the movie. There couldn't be a better person to make your first film with, you know? And then so getting back to Alec, I think if Bill hadn't been already attached to the movie, I'm not even sure Alec would have even taken a meeting on this. But Ed got this script to Alec, and apparently, and Alec says this himself, so this is coming directly from Alec. He started reading the cooler, and when it got to the scene with the kicking the pregnant woman, so to speak, he didn't even wait for the outcome. He just threw the script down and he said, "Fuck this! There's no way I'm doing this movie." So he calls up his agent and he goes, "What kind of script did you give me to read?" And I think the agent said, or it was Ed, or his agent said, "Just finish reading that script, Alex, not what you think." So then he picked it up. He saw, how it wasn't, for people who haven't seen the movie, I don't want to spoil it for him, but it went in a different direction. And then I think he was on board with it from there. And then, I met with Alec. It was a good meeting. I love Alec. I don't care how many public scraps he gets in, whatever it is. I love that guy. I think he's such an amazing actor. And he made the movie under such trying circumstances. He was going through the worst custody battle of his divorce, and yet he turned up on the set every day, a total pro, and just did, a really amazing performance. And he knew it. He knew what he wanted that character to be, which was awesome. And I used to tease him like I was a little bit arrogant, I used to tease him and say, "Alec, you're going to get an Oscar nomination for this role, because I saw what he was doing, but it was really like swollen headed of me to even think I'd get an Oscar nomination on my film."
Right.
And he kept laughing at me and going, and I can imagine what he was thinking. It was like, this kid is directing his first movie and he's telling me I'm going to get an Oscar nomination. What a douchebag. And then people started seeing the movie and seeing his performance, and it was always consistently Alec Baldwin steals the movie. And the funny thing is, I've always thought Bill was every bit as strong as him in the movie. I love what Alec did, but I always thought Bill was just amazing. And it kind of disappointed me that Bill didn't get the attention from this film that he deserved. But
you were certainly blessed with three amazing central performances, and you're absolutely right. Bill's the heart and soul, or not Bill, William H. Macy is the heart and soul of the movie. But Alec Baldwin just has one of those punchy roles where every time he comes in, he just kicks so much ass, and people take, Academy types, they take notice of those supporting roles that, punctuate an already, terrific movie with a fantastic performance. And, I also wanted to say, Maria Bello, wow, like what an awesome performance from someone who up until that point, I'm trying to remember all the different things that she had been in, but one of the biggest things was like Coyote Ugly, and knowing what I know about that movie, having, sort of worked on it as an intern when I was out there and then seeing the final project, that is not anything remotely like The Cooler or what she would go on to do with David Cronenberg and, Downloading Nancy. She really, brought it in that role and, brought out a fearless side to her, which is required, honestly, in all of your movies. I mean, think of all the various performances that, are in your films. You have there's always this, like you say, a visceral quality to everything. And just about The Cooler, because almost every project you've worked on, you've written, except for Pawn Shop Chronicles, based on the credits you see on screen. Who had the original Cooler? Was The Cooler your original screenplay, or was that Frank Hanna's screenplay? How did that come about?
Frank Hanna had an original idea. He's a good friend of mine, and he's probably my oldest friend in L.A. And he was interested in developing a screenwriting career. And I had already sold, Mindhunters to 20th Century Fox, which then got put into Turnaround and ended up with Intermedia and Dimension. And so I had already sort of had a foot through the door. It didn't help my directing career as far as having a foot through the door, but I had sold material. So there was a bit of an awareness of me as a writer, at least. And and one of the big things about Mindhunters was when I first wrote the script, it was my intention to direct it as well, but I didn't have any directing resume, and it didn't seem like it was very realistic. And I always thought I would maybe do Mindhunters as a very low budget movie, like on a cooler level. It was a very different script to what got made. But when the script got put out, it's funny, my original agent didn't even believe in the Mindhunter script, but there was this producer over at Avenue Pictures at the time named Michael Zumas, who was very, and him and his development guys when they asked me to pitch them some ideas at one point, and I was toying with doing the Mindhunter script, and I pitched that in the room, and they all loved it, and they said, well, let's develop this, and I said, no, I'm going to go home, I'm going to write it as a spec in 3 weeks, and then let's just submit it, and that's exactly what I did, and everybody responded really well to it. So they sent it out for a weekend read, and they got into a bidding war, and 20th Century Fox ended up buying it, but they said to me when the deal was being negotiated, they said, if you're trying to attach yourself as a director to this project, you're going to ruin the deal. So clearly you've got other movies in mind, other movies you'll write in the future that you can possibly write to direct. But take this one because the deal was really good. And up until that point in my life, I swear to you, I'd never made more than $2,000 a month at any job, not even $2,000 a month. I mean, I never ever I had no money. I came from a family that had no money. I never had a leg up in this business, so I'd never been offered any kind of money like that in my life. Little did I know that taxes and commissions would take half of it anyway, but it was a big a moment for me to get that kind of independence and know, okay, I've got a bit of fuck you money. Now I can write something else, and I don't have to be dissuaded from directing it, as I knew I would still be. So getting back to Frank would send me like one-liners or ideas for scripts he was thinking of writing all the time, and they were all like usually interesting ideas. And then he sent me one night, he said, what do you think of this idea for a movie? And it was basically the bottom line premise of The Cooler, which is a guy in Vegas who's so unlucky that they use him to cool off tables in a sort of a mystical way, and falls and meets the love of his life and develops lady luck and no longer has his superpower. And that was basically, I think, the premise of what Frank wrote. I don't think I have the original email anymore. And I wrote back immediately, this movie you should write, Frank. This is awesome. I think this is exactly what you should write. And then I thought about it overnight, and I was like, fuck, I want to direct that movie. I know how to make this movie. I just knew in my head the smoky, Vegas-y, noirish kind of quality I wanted to bring to that. So I called him the next day, and I said, hey, why don't we write this together, and then I'll do everything in my power to try and get it made as a filmmaker. And Frank was really agreeable to that. But I said to him, I'm going to do this only on one condition with you, Frank, and that is people are going to say to us at a certain point, let's buy Wayne off, let's push him aside, let's get a bigger director to do this, and I'm never going to step back from this. So even if somebody's dangling, as it actually it sort of almost happened a few times, several $100,000 paydays to buy the script from us, I said, Frank, that money's not going to be real to you because I'm never giving up on it. I'm never like walking off this. And he said, I get it, I understand it. And so, we sat in a room for about couple of days just beating out where we, bouncing ideas off each other, beating out where we thought it would be. And I don't know if this is very typical of the way screenwriting teams work or not, but Frank really knew Vegas very well. Frank is it goes over and gambles, and I don't. My interest in Vegas is the characters that turn up there, but I'm not a gambler. It drives me crazy to lose money like that. And so I said to Frank, I'm going to give you the scenes, the gambling bits, the moments, that are very authentic to the script. And let me focus more on the character stuff. Let me focus on the Natalie Bernie relationship, like Shelley's speeches, stuff like that. And we both, within about 3 weeks, finished our parts. And then I took him, put it together. And then it was just a process over the years where I polished the script and would talk to people, get opinions, whatever, and There was this guy, I always remember, he was loosely in the film industry, worked for a company. He's no longer in the film business anymore, but his name is Levi Antal, and at one point he read it, because the Cooler was originally written as a period film. It was actually literally written in the 70s. And he said to me, he read it and he goes, because this is going to be such a low budget, why don't you consider making it a contemporary movie, but everything that happens in the casino world, because it's the Shangri-La casino, is old school casino. You can write like a 70s movie. It can feel like a period film, but that way when you go outside into the world, you don't have to spend all this money on art department trying to recreate the 70s. And I thought that was a great idea. So that was another step where I rewrote the film to be a contemporary film that was more of a commentary on this being the last of these kind of casinos in a modern age, versus sort of like in the movie Casino, where they're right in the moment of, they see the writing on the wall, but not down to the last casino possibly that is this kind of casino. So that's kind of the genesis of the writing. I think I've over-answered that.
No,
that was fascinating. I loved how you brought up Chaz Palminteri for Baldwin's role, because that makes perfect sense, and I've always loved Chaz Palminteri. And the first time I saw Running Scared, your next feature, he is fucking amazing in that film, and he's the ultimate scuzzy alpha male in that film, and he is so good in that. And I mean, there's so many other things I love about Running Scared, because that's just a brilliant film. But what I wanted to ask you about Running Scared before we really dive into it, and I mean, I guess I could ask you this about any of your films, is how hard do you battle with the MPAA over the ratings of your films? Because I've always looked at you as a filmmaker that makes adult films for adults. There's no bullshit with your films. They're always a hard R, and that's why I love them.
Remind me to get back to Chaz and discuss Chaz a bit. But with the MPAA, we had finished The Cooler completely, and not a single one of us, I think, in the production team ever thought it was an NC-17 film. And so the film was already at the answer-print stage. We had screened in Sundance, and we were screening at festivals around the world, and Lionsgate bought the film at Sundance. And I can't remember where I was, but I got a phone call from Lionsgate, the exec at Lionsgate, Tom Ortenberg, and he said to me, "I've got bad news for you, Wayne." And I go, "Oh shit, what? What could this be?" And he says, "The Cooler got rated NC-17, and we're gonna have to do something about it." And I was like, "What?" And right away, my mind went to that scene where Bill Macy and Maria Bella have had sex for the first time, and the camera sort of travels down, and she puts her hands on, on his crotch there and all. And I thought, I said, "It's that scene, right?" And he goes, "No, that wasn't it. It was the scene later on where he's going down on her, and you catch a glimpse of Maria Bella's pubic hair." And I was like, "What?" I was like, it made no sense to me. It was just that one scene, nothing else in the movie. And in the moment, so I said, well, obviously, Tom said, well, we can go and appeal, but 99.9% of cases never win the appeal. You should know that. So Maria Bella and myself went in and we appealed, and we did our best song and dance. And at that point, the MPA wouldn't even let you reference other films as precedent. So you couldn't even say, "Oh, well, what about Sharon Stone in Basic Instinct opening her legs and that shot and whatever." They just cut you off. They go, "That's got no relevance." So we lost the appeal. And at that point, I just sort of mentally declared war with the MPAA, because I didn't think they were fair. I didn't think I think what their issue was with The Cooler, specifically in that scene, was that it just felt like a real couple having sex, as opposed to sort of fake, glossed up, softcore-ish kind of straight-to-DVD kind of sex scene, or whatever those films were. I always like sex scenes to feel like it's a fly on the wall. And I realized I could never again trust them with movies I was making. But The Cooler was an unusual situation, because in most movies, You haven't finished your movie down to an answer print before you go and try and get a rating. You're still in the editing process, because the MPAA allows you to show more or less a rough cut, and they will give you indications if there are going to be problem areas. So, like Martin Scorsese, I'm so wary of the process right now that I tend to put more in my movies than I even expect to use, and or try and get them in very early on the process to see how they're thinking before I fuck my movie up again.
Yeah, because, I mean, just thinking about and just sort of jumping to Running Scared, and just to preface before I get into anything, I am obsessed with Running Scared. I was blown away when I saw it in the theater. I saw it twice in the theater. I've watched it repeatedly on Blu-ray throughout the years. It is just, I think it is one of the most insane, in a great way, action, neo-noir, all-in-one-night type narrative films that I've ever seen. And one of the things that's always struck me about that film is the intense level of violence and sex, and how, and for good reason, and as you've said, you know, in interviews and stuff that I've read, the film is structured like a Grimm's fairy tale, with each, you know, plot detour resembling one of the classic stories. Running Scared, from what I've been able to understand, this was an independent production that was purchased after you had filmed it by New Line, or am I incorrect? Because I'm
you're right.
I'm right. Okay, because I'm just wondering, there's no way that the Vera Farmiga subplot even gets past the script writing stage at a studio level, let alone in the final cut. And I don't want to spoil it, but
you know,
one of the great things about
But the
I was going to say, one of the great things about Running Scared is that you actually wrote a real character arc for the put upon wife, who typically stays home and cries on the phone and doesn't have any integral part of the narrative. And I don't want to spoil it, but she becomes essential to the last act of Running Scared in a ridiculously memorable fashion, which is almost like a political statement in some ways, which I love. What is the whole genesis of that stuff with Bruce Altman and Elizabeth Mitchell, and what was the response from New Line? I would just love to know.
You know, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because this is that was a scene in the script and in the movie that, if it wasn't for me being maybe as crazy as I am and insistent on sort of what the vision of the film is, everybody along the way wanted to cut it. I remember when, and never mind the studio, I mean, New Line let me put it this way, when the movie was financed by this company called Media 8, who are no longer in business. And they loved the script, and Brett Ratner was involved very loosely. At the same time that I was meeting one of the executives from Media 8 and saying, I want to do this script next, I think Brett, who I'd met in Sundance when he came to see The Cooler, he was also pitching Media 8 to work with me and all that. And so Brett, I remember one of the first meetings where Media 8 was interested in Running Scared. So we were all meeting in this conference room. It was me, my producer at the time, and I think all the Media 8 executives, and Brett was there. And every one of them, except for my producer who knew where I stood, was saying, Wayne, we love this. We want to do this movie. Please cut the pedophile scene. And I said, you guys are crazy, because then you clearly don't understand this movie. That is the heart and soul of this movie. That scene sort of defines what real evil is in the world. It gives an out of left field kind of a storyline to Vera Farmiga, which I loved. I loved that it wasn't Paul Walker to the rescue for the 50th time, of the evening.
Absolutely.
And you can't imagine the amount of resistance it had. And I just basically dug my heels in, because I knew, given the film I was making, that it would be like trying to pull the GIMP scene out of Pulp Fiction,
Exactly. I mean, so there's so many memorable moments to Running Scared. And without spoiling them for people who haven't seen it, because it's still, while it is, I would say at this point, 9 years on, it has certainly taken on modern cult classic status after, not a particularly long life in the theaters, unfortunately. But I know for a fact that there's so many people, and it was so nice to talk about it last week online, and hearing so many people say how much they love that film and how much it, blew them away in the theater. just how did the idea, where did the original idea come from? I know that you're a fan of noir and of the cop thriller. This sort of seemed like your chance to riff on a genre that you've been a huge fan of throughout your life, but really give it a spin that no one's ever seen. And given that this was, your vision through and through, where did it sort of originate from?
All right, let me just finish the. I'll get to that. Let me just finish the sort of the pedophile angle.
Oh yeah.
So I said to the finance producers, I guarantee you, when this movie is tested or shown before audiences, this is the scene that they're all going to remember. This is the scene that they're going to cheer in movie theaters for. And so they let me go ahead and do the scene. I swear to you, even while I was in pre-production, they were still pressuring me to cut the scene. And I said no. And this is also the reason Vera took the movie, because she would she wouldn't have a meaningful part without it. And even in post-production, they were completely nervous about it, and we're talking about cutting it out of the movie. And doing pickups to, if it was a studio, I swear to you, they would have cut that scene out of the movie because they would have been too fearful to release it. And they would have, if this was Harvey Weinstein, he would have cut it out of the movie. And but when we got to the first test screenings, they saw how the audience reacted to it. And it was exactly as I predicted. The audience went insane during the pivotal moment of that scene. And they knew that it was there to stay in the movie. Every now and then, there's somebody I read on the internet who goes, I have no idea why this scene is in this movie. It's out of nowhere. It doesn't gel with the rest of the film. And I just think, fuck you don't get it.
No, I mean, you hit the nail on the head perfectly. Because I didn't see this film in theaters. The first time I saw it is I bought the DVD, and I was watching it, and I was loving the film, and I was really into it. I loved everything with, the whole thing with the Cowboys and John Wayne, and I loved it. Chaz Palminteri, which I'll remind you in a bit. But I remember seeing that scene, and as soon as it gets set up with Bruce Altman, who's always like the affable man. He's always like the generic affable guy. Sometimes he plays a prick, like in The Sopranos and stuff like that. But it was so fascinating because I knew where this was headed. I just didn't know how far it was going to go. And when that scene gets over, I mean, I was blown away by it. And I absolutely, that's one of the main reasons why I love the film so much, is the audacity of having that in there. And how amazing it is, and how well it works. It's just brilliant. And the casting of Bruce Altman. I mean, I think that's perfect.
Bruce. I knew his work a little bit, but let me explain something too. In Hollywood, nobody wants to play pedophiles.
Yeah,
so that was like the hardest bit of casting I think I've ever done in my life, and. I don't want to even give you some of the names of actors who passed on that, even though they really wanted to be in a movie or work with me. And one of the original ideas we had, and it almost happened, is I wanted Kyle MacLachlan and Laura Dern to play the couple and sort of do a little Blue Velvet flashback.
Oh my God!
And
really?
Kyle was into it. And we were just waiting for Laura Dern, and she just couldn't bring herself to do it, and she passed on it, and then Kyle backed out, and so that was sort of...
Oh, my God.
Yeah, well, Elizabeth Mitchell, you got a great performance in Elizabeth Mitchell.
Oh, yeah.
She's chilling.
I was really interested... It's so funny, but every actor in my movies, I either interviewed them for other movies or was interested in them. I loved Elizabeth Mitchell, and I think she might have been my first choice for the Cooler and wasn't available. I just thought she was an incredible actress and is an incredible actress. And then when my casting director, Annie McCarthy, said, what about Elizabeth for that? I was like, really? Yeah, okay, let's see. And Elizabeth is the most courageous actress I know probably to take on that role. I think it's just amazing. I mean, I think that we shot that scene over... It may have been 2 days, 3 days. So I only worked with Bruce and Elizabeth for that period of time. And everybody was really nervous. I was even nervous about how we would talk to the actors about it, the kids and everybody. But we worked it out. We did it really worked out for the best. I think one of the things Elizabeth first said to me, she said, Wayne, I don't actually ever want to touch the kids. And I think if you see the movie, she really doesn't. She doesn't ever make real contact with any of the kids. And I said, I want to do it in a very sinister way. And I said, I like that idea.
Yeah, it's perfect. She at one point she takes her fingers like a witch and she kind of runs them through his hair, through Cameron Bright's hair, and it's like devilish. Like it's like like it's like it gets under your skin.
It made it so much creepier and stronger. And there are moments in that scene. I mean, I'm a sick fuck. So there's stuff in the film that I'm not that way in real life. I just love films that can be very transgressive, knowing that it's pushing the boundaries. But in a movie like Running Scared, it's doing it where evil people get killed in the end, or they pay for their crimes. And there's that moment where Vera first comes to the apartment and she rings the doorbell. And you see Elizabeth Mitchell stop in the mirror in the entryway and adjust her robe. And it's so creepy because the assumption is she's not wearing anything underneath. And whatever they've been doing with these kids, you leave it up to the audience's imagination is beyond perverse and disgusting. And then
so New Line never wanted you to cut it. They never asked you to cut it when you got Media 8. Wow.
No, what happened with New Line is I knew a guy who worked at one of the execs who worked at New Line, and he was interested in showing New Line the movie because I felt it would be a good fit for the kind of movies New Line was releasing and the Bob Shaye era, And I said to him, I'm willing to sneak you the movie and show it to you, but Bob Shaye has to be in the room. If he's not going to be there, I'm not showing you the movie. So he arranged for Bob Shaye to be there, and my instincts were right, that Bob Shaye really, really dug the movie. But Running Scared is famous for being a movie that caused almost a civil war inside New Line, because Bob Shaye, Toby Emmerich, and some of the creative execs really liked the movie. But the marketing guy, Russell Schwartz, despised the movie. The international distribution guy, Rolf Mitwig, I think, I forget his name, despised the movie, and some of the other people on I'm trying to think who, it was someone else, and they were a really powerful faction inside New Line at the time, and Running Scared almost went straight to DVD because they lobbied so hard to Bob Shaye and Toby Emmerich to not have them release this movie. They did not know how to market it. And also, to be a little bit fair to them, the MPAA was kicking their ass on the marketing. They would not allow the kids to be shown in any jeopardy, and that's the entire fucking movie.
Right.
But look, it never got an amazing release. It never got very good reviews overall. It never got great marketing. So, I mean, there were a lot of things against it. But, where I sit today, and I am so grateful that in this day and age, a movie like that could be released, because I was still under the illusions in my head of 70s filmmaking, 80s filmmaking to some degree, where the movies were a little more daring or edgy. I didn't realize, kind of like The Wild Bunch, I didn't realize while I was making Running Scared and while the movie was getting released, that those kind of movies were completely persona non grata in theaters and almost in the public mindset at that time. I don't know why this has happened. I'm kind of mystified, because these are movies that I know people enjoy enormously. The tone of these kind of films is happening on TV right now with True Detective and Sopranos and Breaking Bad, so it shows it's a popular, viable genre for viewers. I just don't know why they've been left behind in theaters. And when the few of these kind of films do screen, or they don't get supported, nobody turns up for them.
No. Yeah, and that's one of the things.
Yeah,
I'm sorry to cut you off. It's one of the things I think that Frank and I both love about your movies, that you're a 70s influenced filmmaker trying to make those types of gritty films, now.
I mean, just real quick, like the films we've highlighted, we get our name from Killing Them Softly. We've spoken about The Counselor. It's like those are films that Nick and I absolutely love. are the films that you make and the films that you're talking about. And you're absolutely right about how it has, you know, kind of moved onto the television medium, and it's as if no one's making those films now, and it's a shame.
And I feel like it's me and Joe Conahan, the last two guys standing, trying to make these films,
right.
and none of us have been all that successful, you know?
You and Joe should have been...
Awesome.
Yeah, you and Joe should have been doing True Detective. I told this to Frank, and I feel like you guys would have just absolutely nailed what's going to go on. I mean, I've only seen the first episode, enjoyed it for sure, but I feel like the milieu speaks to your sensibilities so much, and certainly to a guy like Joe. I mean, Narc is one of the best cop movies ever, I think. So, I could only imagine what you guys could bring to the table, you know, on a long form TV show.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, and like I said to you before, the business is so trendy. It's about who's made a couple of $100 million or $1 billion at the box office, which director just popped out of Sundance, whether they're a good fit for the film or not. Nobody ever really sits down and goes, this is the right director for the piece, and maybe his last movie didn't perform or last two movies, but we know this is the tone this guy will bring to it. I think those days are sort of over where you could go, Walter Hill would be the right guy for this, Brian De Palma is the right guy for this, Don Siegel. I mean, it's and I think the material suffers for that. I see so many films where I see a director being put onto a big sort of one of the few big studio thrillers, and I go, that guy? And it's just, I'm scratching my head. Because honestly, if you come to me with a mainstream studio comedy and offer me $10 million to direct it, I may be greedy and take the money, but I'll be reminding them every day on the set that I'm the wrong guy to be doing it.
I want to see a romantic comedy directed by Wayne Kramer.
Yeah,
that's what I want to see.
Wayne Kramer makes
with,
a woman
with pedophiles, with like pedophiles halfway through the film.
Yeah,
that'd be amazing.
Yeah, I guess that is my brand now. But I like any movie in any. I am the most eclectic movie viewer. I mean, some nights I'm watching obscure French, Italian movies from the 70s and 60s that nobody's ever heard of. I'll be watching art movies. I'll be watching anything. You know, I just want the film to be good. But I know,
that's my feeling.
But like Clint Eastwood says in, what is it, which one is it, Magnum Force? A man's got to know his limitations.
Yes.
I'd rather make the kind of movies that I get a kick out of, a thrill from, which are crime thrillers, crime dramas. I'd love to do a real horror movie one day, but a horror movie on the level of something like Rosemary's Baby or The Exorcist, that has a really complex, intriguing script, which I guess is sort of anathema to what's getting made today.
Yeah, no shit.
And that's another genre I was just thinking about the other day that has totally been sold down the river in terms of craft. The Conjuring is the only horror movie in the last maybe 10 years that I can think of that feels like a real well-crafted, well-shot movie in the tradition of a classic 70s, 80s horror movie. Everything is just shaky cam, found footage, shot on 50-cent budget. You can barely see anything. I mean, there were so many great. Even I was watching the other night. It's not an amazing movie by any means, but it's really well created. It's really well made. Is The Car with James Brolin, and even in that movie, there's a classicism in the filmmaking. It's controlled filmmaking that's lit beautifully. They've put a ton of money into the design and everything. And it was probably not even a super expensive movie, but you go back and you look at these films, and you really see a real vision for the films by the filmmakers, as opposed to anyone who can just pick up a camcorder or an iPhone today and just shoot something, and it can maybe feel scary the first time it was done with Blair Witch or something like that. But I'm not interested in that. I honestly don't want to see that. I want to see an intellectually frightening horror movie like Rosemary's Baby, like The Exorcist. I mean, there's so many. I mean, there's great examples of what, like a movie like, for example, did you see, what's that crazy transgressive French movie with the underground death, like cult that, Martyrs. That movie scarred my mind.
Yeah, well, Martyrs between Martyrs and Inside. Inside is did you see Inside, Wayne?
Oh yeah, excellent, yeah.
that movie just like, come on. I mean, it was just like, Frank, have you seen Inside?
I have not. No, I'm writing both these down though.
Yeah, it's the ultimate. I mean, and I will say this, preface this. I don't watch a lot of horror films. They've either got to be from France, or they've got to be getting serious acclaim, or there's got to be something like Spring. This which I hesitate to even call a horror film, but it merges horror with romance and supernatural, and that I liked a lot. But The Martyrs and Inside were two of the most intense things that I have ever seen in the horror genre. And you're absolutely right. When people strip it down to those base elements and make something that riveting, you really get under people's skin. And I think that you'd probably knock the hell out of an emotionally charged horror film, rather than, like you said, another one of these found footage teens running around that we've seen a million times.
Because, my approach would be to really make it cinematic and scary cinematic in the way of, you can have there's two kinds of scares you get in horror films. One is where somebody walks into a dark room and the cat jumps out of the closet and it's like a shock scare, and everybody gets like an emotional punch from that, but it's a cheap-ass scare, And the other way is where you realize a character's been in a room for maybe 5 minutes walking around, and there's somebody sitting in the chair behind them, and you haven't figured that out until now, And those are the kind of creepy scares that, like, for example, Ridley Scott did so brilliantly in Alien, where he had the creature designed to be part of the architecture of the environment. So at any point, the wall can be just turning into the creature, or you never know. You're so freaked out because you don't know whether you're looking at a piece of wall or the alien's tail. And that's the kind of stuff where I'll tell you a movie that I thought was really well made, even though it had sort of like a cheap video look to it, was, is it Open Sea? Is that the shark film?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Open Water.
Yeah.
Open Water. That movie was so creepy and so chilling because it set up the environment so well for what was there to scare you, that you've got this couple for about 90 minutes treading water, and the sharks are below them. And you also know that if the guy had to put his head under the water and look down, he would fucking see the jaws of death coming up at him. And the idea of that is so frightening, especially at nighttime when it's dark, so they can't even see the sharks on the surface of the water. And then the lightning is flashing, and in each subliminal lightning flash, you catch a glimpse of a fin here and there, I mean,
it was right. I'd forgotten about that one. That one was very good. I remember seeing that in the theater when I was living in L.A., and then showing it to my wife, and that's a movie that even if you've seen it once, it'll still scare you again.
And really, I mean, Jaws is still a scary-ass movie. It's still like one of the most beautifully controlled cinematic experiences of all time. And I saw that, I think the first time I saw that, I was 10 years old. I don't get scared by movies, so the most I'll say the movie really unnerves me or unsettles me. There's no movie that will force me to look away from the screen. But as a kid, when Richard Dreyfuss is going down to examine the boat, and he discovers, I think it was Ben Johnson's head, or
the head pops out.
Yeah,
Jesus Christ.
I mean, that's one of the all-time frightening scare moments of all time. And the music when it happens is the way that John Williams scores that moment is like a lesson in going to film school, just studying the tension in that moment. But like Steven Spielberg is probably my favorite visual artist in film in terms of the way Steven Spielberg tells a story with a camera, and his blocking and his filmmaking skill. I don't always gravitate to the subject matter or the entire movie, the movies as a whole. I think he's brilliant. But when he's on doing something like Jaws or Raiders or even Munich or some of these movies, nobody has a skill set like that. And I think if your teacher, if you're learning or self-educating yourself from what Spielberg's doing, no matter what genre of filmmaker you want to be, you can only learn the good things about the craft as opposed to trying to learn the camcorder, found footage kind of way.
Absolutely, yeah, I completely agree. Spielberg is just somebody for obviously anybody to study and to respect. And like you brought up Munich, I think Munich is just one of the best. I think it's one of the best movies he's ever made. And there's like a geometric precision to that film when you get into the blocking and the shot selection and how everything is so beautifully edited together in that film. I think that's just one of the best movies he's made. I'm glad to hear that it made as much of an impression on you, because I know that movie is very divisive. Some people hate that film. They hate the mixing of the sex and the violence in the last act, but I think that's like crucial. Yeah. I think the final shot of Munich is haunting, similar to the final shot of Gangs in New York.
Yeah, I like Munich a lot. I don't know if I love the ending with the sex as much as you, but but I'll tell you something. If you take 10 of the greatest filmmakers of all time from any generation, and you give them a certain piece of, you give them a scene to shoot, and Spielberg is among them, he will by far, whether it's Scorsese, De Palma, Alfred Hitchcock, Billy Wilder, whoever it is, Steven Spielberg will by far tell the clearest, most unique version of that story with what he's going to do with the camera. The man has such a particular gift. He can break down any script into the best visual components and how they will cut together in a room, and how he brings actors in and out of the frame, and when he chooses to pull his camera back and reveal something, and when he the thing is, I love writing and I love the directing. Not all writers will direct and not all directors are writers. But if you're going to be a director, you really have to bring a point of view and a vision to the filmmaking. It's not just good enough that you're a writer, and it's not just good enough that you wrote the script yourself. You really have to take off the writer's hat when you go to direct your film and put on the director's hat and look at every scene and go, how can I do this in a fresh way that is the most meaningful way to tell the story? And the thing with Steven Spielberg is he is just, he is dead on every time. He may make overly sentimental choices in the way he does something. For example, like Lincoln. Lincoln should have ended when Daniel Day-Lewis walked down the stairs or wherever, down the hallway at the end.
That's what I said.
It was the most perfect.
That last shot.
It was the most perfect.
The last shot with the green light coming into the room. That beautiful shot.
And I don't know what he was thinking by tagging on the Gettysburg Address or like 2 other scenes. I was like, and Spielberg tends to do that. He tends to he has perfect endings like 9 times out of 10, and he tends to overdo it in the end. And I've seen this in a few of his movies. But if you examine each particular scene, directors know that there are certain scenes that are hell to shoot, and they're not the ones you think. Action, everyone will have an almost probably decent take on action, some better than others, but most people will be able to achieve action. Try shooting like 6 people sitting around a table having a conversation and figure out how you're going to cut that together and how you're going to move your camera. And the same goes for like a courthouse scene, where everyone's sitting down and you've got where you're going to take the prosecuting attorney over to the jury and back and all this. Those are scenes that you can really see a director's chops when those guys can make them fascinating, interesting, and fresh. And some of those I love watching Spielberg movies. What I do with Spielberg is I turn off the sound and I just watch his camera moves, and it's like watching somebody writing music.
Real quick before we move on, I wanted to remind you about Chaz Palminteri.
All right.
For
and I realized
Running Scared.
I didn't answer the other question about the origins of Running Scared, so hopefully we'll get to that too. But
okay.
So Chaz, after the Cooler comes out, I get a phone call, and it's Chaz, and I don't think I've spoken to Chaz for 2 years, and he goes, Wayne, he was almost in tears, he was like, I just saw Academy screen of the Cooler, man, and oh man, and he was going on and like how much he loved it, and he knew sort of that I had wanted him for that, and I think he was like, yeah, oh man, and it was like just kind of like a heartbroken conversation, and well, that's not to say Chaz wasn't doing great things while I was off doing the Cooler, and he says, we've got to work together, we've got to get that other movie made, which the script was called Second Wind or Contract, depending on what draft you read, and then he was like, let's just work together, let's find something to do together. And so when Running Scared came together, I thought that would be a perfect role for him, and I sent him the script, and he was one of the first guys to read the script, and he was so effusive about it, and he was not, Chaz is a bold guy, and I have to say, he's probably my favorite, next to my late friend Paul, he's the nicest guy in the business. He's nothing like the goomba crazy guy you see on screen. He has those qualities he can bring out if he wants to, but he is the most cool, loyal, stand by you, straightforward guy you'll ever meet. And in fact, when Paul was interested in doing Running Scared, and Paul and I didn't know each other, we had never met each other before. Paul knew Chaz was going to do the movie. And so he called up Chaz and goes, "What do you think of Wayne?" And Chaz was, "Work with this guy. He's a great guy," and all that. So Chaz was really helpful in sort of giving Paul the confidence to step up and do the movie. But I was also going to say about that is so many actors that I interviewed on, like, say, The Cooler or even on Running Scared, they then sort of have found a way to use them in subsequent movies, or like Elizabeth Mitchell. Vera Farmiga read for The Cooler, and I felt she was too young, but I remembered her. I thought she was terrific. And Ivana Milicevic also read for The Cooler, and she's in Running Scared. And so it's sort of an interesting, like Chaz and those actors that I tend, if I have a good, if I meet them and I feel something good with them, I do try and follow through. And I remember saying to Vera, "I'd love to work with you on something in the future," and then Running Scared happened. But
and you do notice from your films you have carried over some, of a lot of the character actors. It seems. I do want to point out. Did you realize that you probably didn't at the time because it wasn't even on? But you are the filmmaker to have multiple actors from the TV show Southland showing up in your films between Sean Hitosi and Michael Cudlitz. I don't know how often.
It's actually.
I don't know if you watch Southland.
I didn't ever think about that, but there's actually another actor from Southland who was in Crossing Over. Is what's his name? He's the guy driving the car with Harrison Ford in the end, where they do the final raid. I should.
What is that? Yeah, I'm trying to remember the actor's name, but I watched every episode of Southland. I thought it was a terrific show, and he
was the Southland was great. Michael Cudlitz and Sean both killed it, and both fantastic actors.
Sean, especially in the last season, he was on fire. Well, Cudlitz was incredible with that character arc.
He was great. I tried to have Sean come in and do Running Scared. I think we offered him Johnny Mesner's role, I think we offered him Johnny Mesner was already cast. I think we offered him, might have been Michael's role even. This was before I even knew Michael, and he didn't want to do a real supporting role there. But I love Sean. He's super, super talented, both those guys. And Michael, we've already discussed Michael turning up and doing a role in my next one. And he said, "Hey, if I'm around, let's do it," Michael's a super great guy, and I'm so happy for his success.
Yeah, no, and it was just funny because I was such a huge fan of that show, and when I was revisiting all of your stuff over the last few weeks, even my wife said, "Wow, like look at all the Southland alums, like it's just hysterical." But sort of tying into to Crossing Over and to Pawn Shop Chronicles, you always have a huge cast, and you're always able to bring together this eclectic group of actors, no matter what the project is. And each project has been so different. You're always looking for the right person for the right role. When you went to, and not to spend too much time, obviously, because we know what the situation is with Crossing Over, that was a huge film with a huge cast. How did that sort of come up in terms of, where you went to think about who's going to play who in that multi-character piece? Crossing
Over was a real passion piece for me because I had always wanted to do a film about American immigration as being an immigrant myself, and doing a film that could really be done from the inside, but didn't particularly just focus on the Mexican immigrants coming over the border and struggling in LA, but looked at sort of a worldview, a multinational sort of group of immigrants in LA. Because if you live in LA, and even obviously New York, you'll meet somebody on a daily basis from every country in the world, and they're even though the immigration laws have become more draconian in this country, and so it's not as easy for people to stay illegally as it used to be like 10, 20 years ago, there were many, I would meet all the time, many Australians, many other South Africans, many people from England who did not have papers, who would never be, you're not looking on the street and go, I'm going to pull that guy over and see if he has a green card. And I thought there was a bigger story to be told in sort of, it was supposed to be like my love letter to America, because I do love this country so much. And as a kid, ever since I was a kid, my parents didn't believe me when I was like 5 years old saying I'm going to go live in America one day. And when I'm 21 and getting on a plane, they're like, I guess you were serious about it. That's the power of the imagery of Batman and Westerns and movies. But, also growing up, I saw movies. I didn't come to realize how divisive. I didn't realize while living in South Africa how truly segregated and divisive America really is. Just judging from the political, from the South Carolina shootings and this kind of stuff that's happening all the time, and how divided our government and our population is today. But growing up in apartheid South Africa, when you see American movies or American TV shows like the Mod Squad, and you see sort of the black and white people getting on together and living in the same houses, working at the same jobs, all that kind of thing, you go, fuck, that's the way it's supposed to be. This is a country I want to live in. Plus the movie industry component and the comic books and everything that I ever loved aside from James Bond, which is actually American financed, all came from America. So I wanted to do a movie that really looked at the world through the struggles of immigrants, which are not, it's not, the characters in the movie are not, how can I put it, their lives are not at immediate risk, and nobody's, the issue of immigration is an emotional one. It's not, on the front lines of war and seeing something like, Zero Dark 30 or anything like that. It's about people having the right to live in a place where they feel they can fulfill their dreams, that they feel they can find themselves spiritually, that they can, that for me, for example, as a filmmaker in this country, I needed to be here. South Africa, unlike Australia and the UK, never had its own real film industry, and to this day it doesn't. People go there and make films, but there's no development money. There's no South African Mad Max. I mean, even if you take a movie like District 9, it's all American financed. You can't just wake up in South Africa one day and make a District 9. You have to come here. You have to get to be known in the business. Or if you were from Australia or the UK, you make your Mad Max, you make your Sexy Beast, you make your Chopper, whatever that is. But you're not getting on the radar really by trying to do those kind of movies in South Africa. So for me, it was super important that I have a future here. And I was never really spiritually connected to South Africa, growing up under apartheid, feeling it was wrong. Even in my own family, feeling like there wasn't much sympathy for the system there and all that. I was always very, very much at odds with everything around me and felt like I belonged here. So I understand the feeling of people who, when they come here, want to really make it work for themselves and feel the need to survive, whether they're legal or illegal. And I wanted to convey that with the film. And I guess, and I wanted to do it very gritty and realpolitik. And when it comes down to casting the film, to get back to your original question, you have to cast actors that are going to support your budget. So I originally envisioned for the role that Harrison Ford played, Max, I wanted Kevin Costner, and I chased Kevin Costner for a long time and finally got him to read it, finally met with him, and he agreed to do the movie, and I had him signed off on in my original deal, but they could not make the financial deal with Kevin. And before I actually had got to Kevin, Harrison Ford had read it the first time, and UTA and his reps were, and Harvey and everybody were really trying to get Harrison Ford on the movie, and Frank Marshall. And I think Harrison had only seen The Cooler at that time, and I just don't think he was a fan of The Cooler. So he passed on it. And while we were negotiating with Kevin Costner, who I don't think Harvey really wanted in the movie, Harvey was able to get Harrison Ford to watch Running Scared and read the script again. And this time Harrison Ford was like, I think Harrison really liked Running Scared, which I would have never thought. And so then he started engage with us, and he wasn't, and it was easier to make Harrison's deal financially than what was going on with Kevin. So I loved the idea of Harrison doing it. I also loved the idea of Kevin. If you ask me, it's not fair to an actor who's been in a movie to say, I thought another actor should do it, because I think Harrison did a magnificent job.
Yeah, it's one of his best recent performances, without a doubt.
Yeah, I don't think he thinks that. That's the problem. I don't know what he thinks of the movie.
I don't know why.
Well, I mean, here's what drew me to this film originally is I think it was when I was working at Blockbuster when I was going to college at the time, and I rented it because it had Harrison Ford and Ray Liotta in it. And I mean, I've always loved Harrison Ford. I mean, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I'm a huge Indiana Jones fan. But I think Nick's exactly right. I think aside from What Lies Beneath, which is old now, I think Crossing Over is Ford's best performance. I just think he's had an interesting career with what he's decided to do when he's not, I mean, now he's going back to Star Wars and stuff, and I don't know if he's going to do an Indiana Jones 5. I don't think he's going to play Indiana Jones, but I mean...
And he's doing Blade Runner again.
Yeah, right, exactly, and he's doing Blade Runner again, and I don't know if Gosling's going to be in it with him or what the deal with that is, but yeah, I always looked at Crossing Over as Ford's his last great dramatic performance.
I love Harrison in the film, and I thought he was a super cool guy to work with. He was really gracious and accommodating, and I just got the impression he just didn't really care for it, Not the process of working. He just, I think the final the film when he saw it, and maybe he wasn't sure about the material to start with, but I think he's wonderful, and I think it was perfect for it, and I guess I kind of wish he felt better about it.
Yeah, that's a shame then, because I always looked at that, like I said, as his last great dramatic performance. And then also, I mean, I'm a huge Ray Liotta fan. I love Ray Liotta. We're going to do Something Wild coming up on one of our podcasts. Nick hadn't seen that, and I forced him to buy it on Amazon because I want to do that for one of our films that we discuss. I've always loved Ray Liotta, and I particularly love Liotta in Crossing Over because he's always been, he got typecast as like that scuzzy piece of shit guy, just the scummy guy, and what I love about his character in Crossing Over is he's the scummy asshole until he isn't.
Yeah.
At the end of the film, where he makes this like out of the blue turn where he becomes this sympathetic character. I mean, his second to last scene that's in the finished film before his final scene in the film, but that just struck me.
I wish people had seen the original scene to that because it got so basically butchered in post, but the dialogue, Alice Eve had more lines. She was tearing into him, which got cut out, and I have to paraphrase, I don't remember my original line, but there was, when she's saying on the bed, when I get home and I have to take a hot shower after being with you, before that she also said a line which basically was, when you think, I'm trying to think, how did she put it? You think that's me being wet for you, and it's not. Before you come in here, I have to take a bottle of like Astroglide or something like that. And she was just
oh my God!
And it needed to be in that scene, man. She just broke him down, and they just didn't have the courage to leave that in the film. And some of and even in the first scene with her and Ray Liotta, where they're negotiating the terms. Right. It makes it seem like she is sort of weaker in the process. But in the real cut of the movie, she's the one negotiating. She's like latched onto it, and she's going, okay, here's what you can't do to me. You can't put a bag over my head, and she goes into all this kind of list, and all of that got cut. And because she was a shrewd operator, and they wanted to make her character seem more sympathetic. And, that's those slight tonal changes that people do in post-production that just throw a movie off its axis.
That's just such a shame, because I know it's been beat to death with everything, and I don't want to get into it, but I when I view Crossing Over, and I just watched it recently, I bought it on Vudu because I couldn't find my Blu-ray. That's actually, I double dipped on that one. That was like my first Kramer double dip. But you're welcome.
I'm sure I'll see. I'm sure I'll see 5 cents in 10 years.
Actually, it was a triple dip because I just bought it on Vudu. But anyway, I think it's one of those rare films that I can watch that's been fucked by the studio, but I still see the brilliance of what it is trying to be, or the roots of what it is. I'm trying to think of other films off the top of my head. Like Abel Ferrara's Fierce City comes to mind because I love that film, but that's obviously just been butchered by whoever cut it and the studio that put it out, because, I mean, the film's incoherent at times. But
look at something like what happened, totally different milieu, but look what happened with Mike Judge when he went to make one of the ultimate satires of our modern time with Idiocracy, and he can't get, sometimes I just don't understand, and I don't, obviously Frank and I don't work in the industry, so, it is what it is, but are these guys reading the material? Are they actually spending any time in their offices actually finishing a script, or are they reading the first 10 pages, reading the last 5, seeing who's attached, and then greenlighting something based on a previous track record? Because it's kind of like, I
think it's more the case. I think it's more the case where they maybe read the script once or twice, decide it's good material, put it together, but they're not filmmakers. So during the process of making a film, I don't think they have the confidence to. Well, not everybody, but they don't think they have the confidence to go up to the director and go, I think you should block this differently, or I think you should do this or do that. But once a movie enters post-production and the director presents his first cut or his cut, it's open season. Everybody's got an idea. Everybody's got a thought. Sometimes the ideas are good and they're meaningful. Other times it's people just trying to justify their existence. And then you have to go through the test preview process. And so now you're at the mercy of 300-400 people who wouldn't pay to see this movie in the first place, who are now giving all kinds of stupid...
Yeah, they're there because it's a free movie. Yep.
Yeah, they're giving all kinds of commentary. And, like on Crossing Over, I went through like 4 or 5 test screenings of that movie. And you know what you get every time? I really didn't need to see Alice Eve's boobs. That's like the consistent note. So then that gets back, Harvey reads that, or whoever, which other executive, and goes, boy, okay, I know how to get the score up. I'm just going to cut her tits out of the movie. It's literally as simple as that. It gets like, I don't like that he said that word to her, or I don't need to see this, or I don't need to see that. At that point, you might as well have your 300-member test audience behind you on the set every day going what you like before I even fucking shoot it, if it's not going to get in the movie.
So to move from that to Pawn Shop Chronicles, because that movie feels like something that was shot out of a cannon and made, and I say that in a great way because I think it's a blast and I think it's fun, especially for people who really like that sort of wild madcap sensibility to action and violence and black comedy. That movie sort of just is a gigantic middle finger to America, to various subcultures.
Oh, fuck yeah, it is.
And that's something that you did not personally write, yourself. And being the only film in your resume not written by Wayne Kramer, that one had to have appealed to your anarchic sense, I would say, right?
Yeah. Well, it came to me through Paul Walker, who we were trying to put another movie together, and it wasn't really happening at any accelerated speed. And he was going to do that movie anyway. Well, they had pre-financed it on him, so he had a certain amount of control in the process. And the original director was Fred Durst, and he had dropped out. And so Paul said to me, "Hey, I think you'll kind of like this material. So why don't you read this, and we could make this movie right away if you want, or pretty soon." So I read it, and I had a blast with it. But I also, there was a part of me that said, if I make this movie, I am going to get raked over the coals that it's a Pulp Fiction ripoff. I knew that was going to come. And I said, and then I had to measure it against, do I want to go and hang out with Paul and some other cool actors, have a good time, make this funny, transgressive movie, and hope it will stand on its own 2 feet and people will sort of give it a fair shake. And I think I was a little naive about that. I think
it's so easy for people to say, oh, it's a Tarantino clone, oh, it's a Tarantino ripoff, because let's be honest, Quentin Tarantino reinvented independent cinema in 1994 with Pulp Fiction, and he created a subgenre of film or reignited a subgenre of film that was nowhere near as popular. I mean, for the last 20 whatever years, you can pick apart how many movies have come and gone that have tried to ape his style. And to be honest with you, it's like, yeah, sure, in Pawn Shop Crowds, I mean, I'm sure Frank probably would agree here. Yeah, it's got some Tarantino influences, but at the same time, it feels more like an unhinged R-rated comic book.
Yeah,
and at least to me, with a lot of pointed social satire, which again has infected all of your work.
I never ever approached it like it was anything remotely like the Tarantino universe, and when I read it, I always felt it had a little bit more of a Coen Brothers, Raising Arizona kind of vibe to it, or an EC Comics Creepshow kind of thing, and I wanted to push it in that direction. Quentin Tarantino, and Quentin, who I know a little bit, although I haven't spoken to him in a while, we do not have anything like the same style, not in directing, and really not in writing. I don't reference a lot of popular culture. Quentin is a genius. He's brilliant. But I don't write sort of nudge, nudge, wink, wink kind of stuff, or I don't write, it's hard to really define what is the magic source in Quentin Tarantino's work. All I know is that I go for more of a gritty realism. And I'm more of a Walter Hill, Sam Peckinpah, Don Siegel, Brian De Palma kind of filmmaker, whatever that meant, that you mush that mentality together and whatever you get out of there with maybe a little bit of a Spielberg aesthetic, But, so it was, but I could see that it was already being pitched as a redneck Pulp Fiction, and I should have really cut that one line out of the movie in the beginning of the film that vaguely refers to the pawn shop in Pulp Fiction, where Vincent D'Onofrio talks about his brother getting killed in a pawn shop.
Right.
I mean, I really should have just wiped that. I thought it was a funny line, but I should have cut it because it was just putting a bullseye in my chest. But, you're just going back to, but that movie too, it was real huge fight in post-production.
Really?
Yeah. I don't want to get too deep into it, but the main producer on the film saw it very differently in post-production, even though I shot the script. He wanted the film re-edited in a linear narrative, which would have everything sort of happen, intercutting all the pieces together, and it really didn't work for me. And they also cut out, so much of the transgressive stuff, so much of the sex and violence. You wouldn't have recognized the movie. And I really had to go through the test screen process, and because I had it in my contract that if you wanted to alter the movie, because you had to prove it in the test screen process. The film that got the highest score won, and thankfully I won that process. Whereas on Crossing Over, I lost it, and that's another whole complicated story as to why that happened, but. It's never easy, man. It's never easy to try and get to bring a movie like that out. And then when you do bring out a movie, when you do protect all these elements that you think makes it sort of this, unusual potpourri of this kind of film, you just get eviscerated by the critics. But I think only 17 critics even reviewed this movie, or even less than that.
It's not a critic's movie. This is not an old 65-year-old white man's movie. No offense, short of a few people who have an adventurous taste in film. This is a movie for people who want to sit back and watch some craziness and see some shit go down that's wild. Come on.
It's a total goof. And it was a tough shoot, but when the camera was rolling, we may have had a better time than people watching the film, even, watching these performances take place.
Paul is fantastic in it. You got two of the best performances from Paul, and I probably don't want to talk too much about it. It's probably a tough subject to talk about, but, it's awesome that you had a chance to work with him and get two great performances from him.
No, it was my privilege to work with Paul, and he was a good friend, and I loved the guy, and he marched to his own drummer, and he never let anything get him down, other than, that he sometimes didn't get the respect he deserved in the film industry, in the film community, from people who should have cast him in better projects.
He was due his Steve McQueen film.
Yeah, and we talked about, let's find that movie. He wanted to find another Running Scared. He really wanted to find another Running Scared to do it, and he should have been. He should have. He was just finding his. He was just getting into his prime. He was very pretty when he was younger, but he was sort of, he was always going to be a handsome guy, but he was just sort of finding that
sweet spot.
Yeah, and he
think about the comedic timing in Pleasantville and how wonderful he was there.
People don't realize the acting skill it takes a guy to do a Running Scared just physically. You're seeing the movie and you're exhausted after 2 hours. Paul had to do every take like 5-6 times. So he went through all of those guys in Running Scared. I mean, when you see a guy get his across the face with a gun in Running Scared, like when Tommy and Michael Cudlett's character are like threatening Paul in the junkyard, and Johnny Mesner's hitting him across the face. Michael's character Sal, they're really hitting him with the gun. And when Paul and Johnny Mesner are going at each other, they're really like they're laying into each other. And it's so funny because I just watched State of Grace again the other night on the new Twilight Time Blu-ray, which is awesome. But I would listen to Phil Joanou's commentary, which you guys, if you haven't heard it, you're going to love it, because Phil Joanou is another filmmaker like Joe Carnahan and myself, who really wants to do these kind of movies. And just hearing him talk about the process of State of Grace, he was given so much freedom to do it, and these actors really brought it for him. He would say every day there'd be a broken finger, or Gary Oldman would get so deep into his role he'd beat up an extra that didn't know it was coming.
That's amazing. I still have to order that. I still have to order that Twilight Time Blu-ray.
Yeah, it's worth it for the commentary alone, I tell you. And then it's got an isolated Morricone score, which is always a plus. But it's the same. These actors who really get into it and bring it. I mean, Paul didn't want to fake it. Paul was just like, "You're gonna hit me." And he was a tough guy. He was a tough guy. And those guys are too, like Penn and Goldman. I mean, Gary Oldman, when they get into those moments, I mean, I would hate to be an extra on the set because it's going to be scary.
I'm ordering that tonight after we're done recording. That's it. I got to order it. I want to jump in here real quick. Pawn Shop Chronicles is your film that I've watched the most. And I don't know if it's my favorite film or not, but I absolutely love it because... Yeah, I know that when it came out, and I remember reading reviews about it, it was called a Tarantino knockoff, which it isn't at all. I mean, honestly, the only comparison I can draw when I watched it this time was when Matt Dillon's in Elijah Wood's house and he grabs the rifle and then he looks up and he sees the ball and chain, and it's kind of like in Pulp Fiction. But whatever. I mean, they're two completely different films, and yours is a pitch black satire on a big part of American culture, which is one of the reasons why I absolutely loved it. I mean, you brought up earlier, the shooting that just happened and how America's still really fucked up with everything.
It couldn't be more relevant than this, with that mentality, that mindset,
Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
I was stunned to realize there is a Confederate flag flying above the state house of South Carolina. I was like, what? That's to me, that's like the Nazi flag being flying somewhere in Germany.
No, honestly, and it's in Alabama.
And it's on the Mississippi flag. I'm like,
yeah,
this is a wake-up call to me, because I thought it was more like an underground cultural thing.
No.
I did not realize it was so sanctioned at a government level.
Yeah, it's insane.
And they can't even take the flag down without an act of the State House or whatever it is over there.
No, I know, and I mean, I was just reading that Amazon.com stopped, and Walmart and all these companies are going to stop selling Confederate flag stuff, and how sales are through the roof because it's just it's all fucked up. But yeah, that's exactly why I love Pawn Shop. I mean, I love Pawn Shop Chronicles. I love the cast. The cast you put together is just Thomas Jane's scene. Oh my God, is amazing, and obviously Vincent D'Onofrio, and Lucas Haas, and Paul Walker. I think that's his best performance. And just everything you put together, And I have to tell you that when I was talking to Nick, when Nick and I knew we were going to have you on, we were talking about your films, I called Pawn Shop Chronicles your Fosse film because it's just this fuck you film. And it's just, oh man, I just have to tell you, I got to digress from gushing here, but the end of the film with Amazing Grace and then all the naked women marching in and getting wrapped in American flags is one of the greatest fucking things I've ever seen in my entire life. When I watched that, I remember I Redboxed the film. It was right after it was close to the time when we became friends on Facebook. I Redboxed the film and I was watching it and I was just enjoying the shit out of it. Matt Dillon and Elijah Wood playing the creepy fuck that he's so good at playing now after Sin City. And just the end of that film, oh my God, it's just as if you have, it's just like you're giving your middle finger to the camera, and I just think it's beautiful.
I mean, that was the appeal to me when Paul first brought the project to me, was to do something really balls out and crazy and completely, unrestrained. And I'm not sure I 100% achieved the best version of Adam's script. I mean, I'm a very self-critical filmmaker, and we didn't have a lot of resources to do that movie. So every day was a struggle to put it on to put it on screen. And I had a really great supporting crew. I mean, James Whitaker, the cinematographer, really went out of his way to light and shoot it as best as could and get the right equipment. And Anastasia Mazzaro, my production designer, who worked on movies, big movies like Dr. Parnassus and got an Academy Award nomination. She really, she was out there scrounging to get the best elements, to build a carnival, to do all this kind of stuff. It was just, people really did it, really invested themselves in doing the best job they could, when the budget really, the movie should have cost more like, it cost about $5 million, but it should have cost really more like $10 million to even get where we needed to be. So it wasn't, it's very different. It's very different for a filmmaker to look back on the film you made and to have the same experience that someone sees it by just putting it on fresh, because every day you look at a scene, you go, I should have done that. Right. And there are a lot of moments in Pawn Shop that I do look at that and feel like, I could have done it so much better. But I also know I didn't have time. I didn't have a lot of prep on that movie. So I struggle with myself with the film. I mean, I think a lot of the funny stuff was in Adam's script, a lot of the transgressive stuff. And I remember one conversation with the producer where we're talking about the Elijah Wood, Matt Dillon scene, and he was going, "You're not really going to do all that with the fish hooks and all that." I'm going, "Well, yeah, that's what I want. That's part of what appealed to me in the script, right. Is as transgressive as that is, I want to do that. In fact, the script was more violent. I actually toned it down a bit, because when Matt Dillon comes back to the house after he sees what Elijah Wood has done to his wife, he lays into him, but I shot it from pulling back the camera away from the house and hearing the sound effects. But in the script, you actually see him torturing and pounding him to death.
Oh my God.
I didn't really have the time or the resources to do that. I knew, because I was really under the gun, but I also knew it would probably just push the film over into the real kind of horror porn kind of genre. And that's not really the way I saw it. But
that scene is fucking tough. Yeah. With the hammer. Yeah. How did you do that? Like, honestly, like I mean, when I've seen the film probably 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and I watched it right before we recorded, like I told you prior, and I mean, I don't look away at that scene, but I almost do every time I watch it, because it is just, it's awesome.
Well, Elijah Wood is such a cool, accommodating actor that he said to us we could break his 2 middle teeth. And so when you see him in public, he doesn't have those teeth anymore. I'm kidding. No, we found we shot in Louisiana. We shot in Louisiana. and we hired a local makeup guy who was really superb, and he didn't work for Ken BFX or any of these big places. You know, we just said, here's what we need, and he built this device that fits into Elijah's mouth. So it was like a fake mouthpiece with a cast of Elijah's teeth, and you don't actually see the teeth break on camera. It's done on a sort of cut, and you see blood spurt and all that. So after the impact of the hammer, he took the mouthpiece, and we only had one of them, I believe, and he chiseled and broke the teeth so it looked like that. And then he put it back in Elijah's mouth with a whole lot of blood. And Elijah, I was amazed that Elijah put up with that thing for so long. I mean, talk about an actor who just didn't complain for one moment and was under such uncomfortable circumstances. I mean, it probably looks a lot worse than in the film than it was because he seemed pretty comfortable once it was in his mouth, but it just couldn't have been comfortable with the blood and everything.
Yeah, he's certainly shown himself recently to be a big player in sort of the horror thriller action, category. He seems like he's going out of his way to, work in those kind of films. So I guess I'm not surprised to hear that he didn't mind.
Yeah, he he loves that kind of stuff. And he's a sweet guy. I've only got good things to say about him, and he's a really good actor. We're lucky to get that cast, But I'll say something. I want to say something about Pawn Shop Chronicles, though. The interesting thing is that movie really hurt my career. I don't know, because the movie just got thrown away, barely had a release, got all these bad reviews. Even though you got all these good actors in there and all that, it's like actors are looking when they want to work with a director. They're looking to be like, oh, this is the guy who's just got Oscar nominations, or this is the guy who just won the Oscar, or this is the guy whose movie just became, what's the movie, the sci-fi movie with the android?
Oh, Ex Machina?
Yeah, Ex Machina. They're looking, all the heat's on Ex Machina now, so let's hire Alex Garland. I mean, that's kind of, Pawn Shop Chronicles, whether they actually even saw Pawn Shop Chronicles themselves, some of the, you talk about there's a lot of actors, and you can say there's the A-list, the B-list, the C-list. Well, it's the A-list that get your films financed. And the B-list, maybe if you get enough of them together, but you really need those A-list actors. So when an A-list actor, and not even the actor, but a lot of times the agents, they'll go, look at this guy's last movie. What happened to him? He did Crossing Over, which nobody liked, and then he did Pawn Shop Chronicles, which nobody liked, and, it just, that, no matter how the movie may be revisited or discovered 10 years from now, when you do a movie like Pawn Shop Chronicles, when a director decides, I'm going to do this film, now I know that I'm going to have a blast doing this film, and I want to be out on the set directing, but if you don't sort of look into the future and see the risks in how that film's going to be perceived, and if it's sort of not really from your DNA and you feel like such a strong desire to make this film, there are real repercussions that it does to your career. It's like you have to go out and prove yourself again. I have these real mixed emotions about Pawn Shop, whether it was the right thing for me to have done, because it really hasn't made my life easy.
Well, and you hope, and I know that you've made some comments here and there. There's a few things on the horizon that we can look forward to, it sounds like. So it sounds like despite the last two efforts not finding the right audience and not having the greatest experience with people, you're still able to, get the next Wayne Kramer thing going, which is excellent for fans of your work. Can you talk a little? Can you say a little bit about what might be coming up for fans?
Yeah. Well, the one thing, the thing I've realized from the last two experiences is that I really need to be directing my own material, which is not a slight against Adam, because I thought he wrote a wonderful script. I just need to direct material that starts with my DNA and ends with my DNA. That I truly have a burning, powerful desire to see this film made, which is the one I'm going to do early next year. And the other thing is to align myself with simpatico producers who are very strong producers, and producers who see the same movie as I do, and I think over the last couple of experiences, I don't think even though I don't think there was a synchronicity in that way, and I don't think I'm a difficult person to work with. I always have great experiences with actors, but I feel like if we head down the road and we say this is the movie we're going to make, then we need to stick with that being the movie. I don't want to end up in post-production and you're telling me this is now the movie it's going to be, which is nothing like the movie we all set out to make, just because somebody got scared by a test screening audience number or something like that. But with regards,
or have someone's going to be offended in some way, shape, or form. I mean, it's
I mean, I look at David O. Russell's career, and this guy's a brilliant director. He's got a pretty volatile guy, and he went through a disastrous period where he had I Heart Huckabees and then Nailed, which didn't get released up until very recently without his name on and not finished completely in. And I think a lot of people thought that David was damaged goods after that. But then Mark Wahlberg reached out and rescued him with a fighter, and he's come back like gangbusters, and he's always been a talented guy. And who knows what it's like to be on his sets. I hear it's still volatile, but he gets the job done.
Right.
And sometimes some of the most unique films are born out of turmoil and madness and craziness. So I guess it's all.
Another example is like Catherine Bigelow. I've always loved her work. Point Break, one of my favorite movies, and she was out in the wilderness for 10 years. I think it was after was it
K-19?
Yeah, or did she do K-19 before or after the Weight of Water?
Weight of Water came after K-19, like 4 or 5 years after, when she was, nobody wanted to work with her.
Yeah, and she was really struggling out there, and then she found a passion project, and she delivered. And you realize that these filmmakers, and I'm not just talking about myself, but you're talking about these filmmakers that you love, still have it in them, and it's a luck of the draw. Look at Martin Brest. It made some of the most successful movies of all time. Yeah. And then got kicked to the curb after Geely, and there's not a lot of forgiveness in the filmmaking community's hearts for failure or for movies that just don't light up the world. So, I mean, I'm glad you guys see the movies for themselves and are not looking at it from a numbers business and all the rest of it. But getting back to the film I'm going to do next year is really, really in my wheelhouse. It's a NYPD cop drama thriller. It's got the same sort of visceral kick as Running Scared, but it's about women cops, mother-daughter cops, and it's a really cool Sidney Lumet on steroids kind of project. And hopefully we're going to shoot it in New York, and we've already cast one of the role of the daughter, who's a very super happening actress on television right now. I'm not going to reveal who it is just yet, but her film career is also blooming, and awesome. It's going to be raw and gritty and emotional and a lot of heart and soul. And everyone who's reading the script right now is falling in love with it. I hope a mother-daughter cop dynamic. Yeah, and the daughter is adopted. I don't want to get too deep into it, but
of course. And it just sounds intriguing.
The daughter's family was all murdered. They were drug dealers, and the mom was a first responder. And the daughter was 11 months old when she arrived at the crime scene, the only survivor of this, where 10 family members were murdered. And she becomes bonded with this child, and a few years later adopts her. And the daughter and the guy who they believe was responsible for the murders gets sent away for life. But they never found the murder weapon. And when the daughter grows up and she graduates from the police academy, and she's a couple of months on the job in East New York in like some of the worst neighborhoods. An incident happens where the murder weapon from 20 years ago turns up, and it looks like that there's other parties who are guilty and possibly cops. And so
this sounds amazing.
Dude, this sounds fucking incredible.
Yeah,
seriously.
It's going to be fucking awesome. And the last like 20, 30 minutes of the movie are just insane, and
yes. Oh, I can't even wait.
And will you have James Whittaker shooting it for you again? Probably, I would hope.
I don't know what the crew's going to be at this point. I'm just we're just finalizing. We're trying to get the cast finalized.
Yeah, probably still too early. I love his work his work with you. The his work on Running Scared is like, it's like stands on its head, and it's over the top but amazing. And I've always felt like, you know, like Frank said that Pawn Shop Chronicles was your Fosse film. I always kind of felt like Running Scared was like your Tony Scott movie, and like you just went nuts with the style. And I just think he's a super sharp cinematographer. So
yeah, he's
very exciting.
He's a brilliant cinematographer, and he definitely should be getting bigger studio gigs. I don't know why that hasn't happened. It's like it's the same thing with writer directors and cinematographers. They look at the cinematographer who just shot fill in the blank big Avengers or whatever the movie is, and that's the guy who won my movie, because they just love to bolster their resume, but they don't look at the quality of the work. They're not looking at how does this guy shoot faces? How does he light faces? What is the quality? How does he light rooms? I mean, all of those things are really important, especially me. On a certain budget, how much the design of the shots comes from the director. So if you want the scene to feel visceral, you want the camera to fly in here, do that, and I storyboard my entire movies, but then I have to turn it over to the cinematographer. It's almost like the easy part is mine, although it's not easy to visualize these films and storyboard them, but somebody actually has to make that happen, and in a very quick amount of time, and with a limited budget. So Jimmy's amazing at transcribing my storyboards into the reality of what can be done in the world with them, because sometimes they're super, super ambitious for budgets that just aren't there. Running Scared is the film I think that's really closest to my heart in terms of the genre and the kind of movies I love, and intense rides. I love intense movies, but not just intense and violent for the sake of it, with characters, soulful characters, with unusual situations and scenes. I love the crime genre, the gangster genre, Sexy Beast. I always talk about that. It's one of my favorite films of all time. I mean, films that have heart and soul, and I think flawed characters, The Wild Bunch, Charlie Varick, films that deal the world, anything with Lee Marvin, they deal the world with the tough guys, but usually these guys have always got a chink in the armor. There's always a vulnerability. Sidney Lumet, Prince of the City movie, that audiences should see today, with a sort of a tone of a Training Day kind of thing, I just want to go back quickly. The actor that you talked about the Southland cast. The other actor that was in Crossing Over was from Southland was Kevin Alejandro. Do you remember him from Southland? Southland, right? Now, what's the series that you were talking about?
Yeah, that's what Nick was talking about. Southland. I have not seen it.
Kevin.
Southland.
Yeah. Look up Kevin Alejandro. He had a pretty big role in Southland for a while.
The name, I don't know the name like I know the other guys, but now that you've mentioned it, I will go back and double check, because you're right. It's hysterical that you would have had so many players from that TV show popping up, throughout the various films. But I guess that's a testament to your overall eye for casting and for the people that you use for casting your films, because we said before, each movie, regardless of genre, has had a very, very deep and exciting cast. So. This has been fantastic. I mean, if there's anything else you want to tell us, or anything else about anything coming up, I know that your time obviously is valuable, because if you're not working, then no one's doing anything.
Yeah.
So,
I just wanted to say I wanted to say about casting is it's so frustrating, because I can see who the great actors are who are coming up, but you just can't get them cast, you can't get them financed until they've made a massive movie, or even Tom Hardy was not that easy to cast until Mad Max. And you're going, Tom Hardy, really? I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I'll tell you who I think is going to be the next big star it's a guy like, and a bigger name director will have to cast him, because I have to typically build my movie on foreign pre-sales, and they always want sort of like the name actor, but it's an actor who's on Game of Thrones right now. His name is Mikhail Huisman, and do you know who I'm talking about? Do you watch Game of Thrones?
I do. He
plays what's his name? What's her name? The Dragon Queen's main bodyguard, who's also her lover.
Oh yeah. I know who you're talking about.
He's been on Orphan Black. He's been on a bunch of. He was on Treme. He's just a terrific actor, and I think he's actually in The Age of Adeline. He plays the main love interest in that film. Watch out for that guy. That guy's got everything, and it's like he's going to blow up. I'm sure in the next couple of years.
Awesome. Yeah, man, it's been incredible having you on. I really appreciate you taking your time out and talking with us about your films and everything. It's been amazing. Nick and I were geeking out all week just waiting to do this. So yeah, I really appreciate your time.
It goes without saying, Wayne. Thank you very much. I said to Frank before, if I ever thought I would have been talking to the guy who made Running Scared. When I was sitting in the theater, I would have thought I was lying. So lying to myself.
Yeah, exactly.
So thank you very much for giving us stuff to talk about and to love and to honestly, and I know it goes for Frank, for me, to obsess over, frankly. So that's what we love to do. Love shining a spotlight on movies that need the attention, need the acclaim, and deserve it.
Oh, I just want. Well, you guys are welcome, and thanks for doing this. I mean, I think you guys have such a love of film, and you truly are genuine film lovers. And it's not like sometimes people reach out to you and they flaky, and it's can you read my script and all of this. You guys just come from a place where whether you're writing scripts or not, you just have a true love for film and good taste in film, and approach every film. Not everybody puts on a film and has and hopes for the best when they see a film. You guys go in it with real open hearts and minds, and you're still so optimistic about film and the art of film, and it's just keep that enthusiasm, because you're the audience that I make films for.
Well, we're excited. We're excited to have you make them, man, for sure.
And I just wanted to say also, because we didn't really get the time to touch on it, but it's such a tragedy what happened to James Horner yesterday, And
exactly.
Goes with that, and especially for someone like you, who's we know, Frank and I both know that you're a soundtrack music buff. It's just staggering to think that a guy with that.
Just a huge loss. And he was truly one of the greats, even if like over the last couple of years he wasn't getting all the prime gigs, which he should have been getting a lot better, and they apparently rejected his score to Romeo and Juliet, which they shouldn't have but he had one of the greatest filmographies of film composing, and probably my favorite score of his is Legends of the Fall, but almost anything from the Wolfen, 48 Hours. Go back and listen
Glory,
to that.
Yeah.
The Rocketeer.
Yeah, The Rocketeer. Absolutely.
I guess what tortures me about it is it wasn't like he was an old guy suffering from cancer or anything like this. He was still, I consider him still in his prime. And the thing is, James Horner, he got his break very young, so he still has an enormous body of work, When
I found out last night, actually, you told me when we were chatting, and I said to my wife Erica, I said, you've got to listen to these credits, and I rattled them off, and we just both were like, you can't comprehend working on that type of a filmography. Just between the various filmmakers that he worked with, and the ups and downs, and the successes, and the massive films, it boggles the mind, to be honest. I've never understood music writing. I think it's just insane, and the way that people think like that musically, and how they can write music down, and it's just something that I'll never be able to comprehend, and I'll always be in awe of those people who are able to do it.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's the one component of the film I can't do, although some directors can do it. But I do know what I'm looking for, and I do love and collect film music and listen to it while I write, and I feel like I've got a good ear for it, and I get excited when I hear a new composer who I think is wonderful, and I love listening to the classic scores as well, and It'll be a long time before another James Horner comes along. He actually apparently composed the score to the Jake Gyllenhaal movie Southpaw. I see on the credits, so there's that one still we get to hear.
Wow, and that looks pretty strong too. Yeah. Actually, one guy you should I'm guessing that you know the name, but just one parting thing here. The work of Alex Ebert is very interesting and very for a newer guy, the guy who did All Is Lost and Most Violent Year.
Yeah, he is talented. Yeah, and I'm looking to see what other stuff he does. I mean, it's another guy I love enormously is Clint Mansell. I'm a huge Clint Mansell and John Murphy.
Yeah.
And John's a friend of mine, but he's not really scoring films anymore lately. But Clint Mansell is brilliant, and there's a couple of new composers that I've got on my radar that I'm looking forward to working with, and because it's really hard for them to catch a break,
Well, hopefully you will get a chance to spotlight somebody new to put in one of the new flicks. Very excited about it.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't wait. That sounds amazing.
Well, great, guys. Again, glad to do it, and I hope you got the goods.
Oh,
yeah,
I'm sure
we do, man. This is going to be a great podcast.
All right, then.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you very much,
Wayne. Very much.
Okay.
Thanks.
Bye.